What does it mean to be personalized when it comes to your health and wellness? I want this to be life-altering and life-changing for you, because you taking ownership, you understanding, you getting to a hyper-personalized level. And hyper-personalized does not mean perfection. Hyper-personalized does not mean rigid. Hyper-personalized does not mean no room for error. It actually means the opposite. It means there's going to be lots of errors. And that's so good because it's going to empower you to actually step forward.
This is the Own It Show, where we tell stories of how everyday people made ownership theirs.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Own It Show. I'm your host, Justin Rothling-Schofer. And if you are new to the Own It Show, I have to just say welcome. It's so great to have you here. It's so great for you to be here. And what we do at the Own It Show is we really tell stories about people who have made ownership theirs. How do you live a life that is different? How do you take ownership of your life in a holistic way, in a personalized way, in a customized way, so that you can realize your God-given potential? That's really what we're all about. And we do that through solo podcasts like you get today. And we also do that by bringing on world-class guests who have ultimately lived that life, being where you are, pursued, overcome, and conquered that life of non-ownership to figure out what it looks like in a different way. And so if you've ever listened to a podcast, if you've ever listened to an episode that has impacted you, that has changed your life, that you've loved, I'd love you to leave a review. I would love for you to give some comments or even share this with somebody, because that is the way in which we continue to reach people in a powerful, powerful way. Today, I'm super excited. Today, we are diving into what does it mean to be personalized when it comes to your health and wellness? What does it mean? What does it work? What does it require of you in order to do that? Because I've gotten this question over and over and over again about what do you mean when you talk about a customized approach, a personalized approach? Because I feel like everybody's doing that. I feel like that's what I'm marketed. I feel like that's what I'm told all the time. And I wrote down on this piece of paper right here, as I was doing some research and really talking about this, is that the thing about this is that we've seen the trends that I've started to see in this industry is that everybody's talking about, and if you're watching on YouTube, I'm giving air quotes, personalization. But really what's happening is it's generalizations disguised as personalizations. And let me give you this example. You go to a functional medicine clinic or you go to a personal trainer, and they're going to come, they're going to bring you in, they're going to sit down, they're going to say, yes, we take a personalized approach to your health. We take a personalized approach to your wellness. We take a personalized approach to your programming. They're going to do an intake form that is generalized. They're going to do a couple tests that make you seem like it's personalized, but all the data just sits there and it then goes into a spreadsheet. You then get given a PDF of your workout plan that's been given to 45 different people before you. You get maybe a customized supplementation routine, which is 45 different things that you have to take. And quite frankly, it's the same thing they've given to every person that has a deficiency or a dysfunction or some level of interruption of health. And it's really not built for you. It's really not something that's customized for you. It's not really something that can be fully ordained or fully built around you. And so we're going to talk today about what does it mean? What should you look for? And what does customization, personalization really mean in 2024? What should you be looking for and calling out so that you can see something in a different way? And so there's really some things that we're going to look at here. Number one is we're going to be looking at, okay, what does it mean when we're talking about personalization from a testing standpoint? Number two, what does it look like from a personalization stance from a supplementation standpoint? And number three, what does it look like from a personalization standpoint on habit and behavior change? So I want to take us on a journey here. I want to help us really understand this, because once we understand this, we can get super tactical, but there's also some concepts that we have to realize and understand and accept that we have to ultimately take ownership of. And I'm going to start a little bit on the upper side. I'm going to start a little bit on the conceptual side of what's happening here. Because in this world, I want you to picture an iceberg. And when we think about health, going back to everything I've talked about with heart rate variability, talking about everything I've talked about on terms of how your body adapts to stress and strain, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional stress, the body doesn't know the difference, has no clue between running a marathon, getting in a fight with your spouse, not getting a great night's sleep, trying to figure out what you're going to do with your business, or sending your kid off to college. Doesn't know the difference between these forms of stress, cannot dissociate or differentiate, and thus the reaction of the body is the same to keep you alive. And so when we realize this, we have to ultimately come back to the concept of what the world tells us health is. And if we picture an iceberg, what the world tells us health is it's a physical thing. The action we take is physical. Now, let me pause there for a second. I want you to let that sink in. The action you take is physical. That's the solution. That's what's going to get you from A to B. That's what's going to get you from B to C. The action you take is physical. And so a lot of times that's where we stop. It's like, oh man, the anxiety you're feeling, just start doing breath work and meditation. The weight you want to lose, just start eating better and exercising more. That emotional stress that you're under, just start journaling. That spiritual stress that you're under, just start reading the Bible or going to church. It's not that simple. And the reason I'm saying it's not that simple is because even though people are saying we're taking a holistic approach because we're talking about all these things, the end result that they're talking about, the thing that you're changing is still only physical. You've only done the physical work. You've only done the physical action. You've only placed the physical thing into your routine, and you haven't truly changed the things holistically that we're talking about that I'm about to dive into. Because if you picture that iceberg, it's just the tip of the iceberg at the very top that says physical. That's the things that are there. And so what happens is everything down below is ignored. And that's why you jump from iceberg to iceberg to iceberg to iceberg, trying to find your solution. Maybe you've gone on a certain diet, you've done a certain workout routine, you've gotten a certain coach, you've tried meditation, you've tried breath work, you've tried sauna, you've tried going to different communities, but it hasn't truly sunk in to be sustainable, to be transformational, because it hasn't been built for you. It's been built for everybody else. It's been what everybody else has said has worked for them. And that's what you've tried to put into play. And so when you think about this concept of only looking at the physical side, you forget this massive mound of ice underneath that emotionally, mentally, and spiritually we have to align. I've talked about order before a lot. And when we only focus on the order of things, it creates a massive poisoning of the heart, the emotional side of things. It creates this decay of the mind, and thus separates you spiritually from where we want to go. And so if we only focus on that physical side, we're never going to actually get something that's truly sustainable. So what we have to do is we have to go under the water. We have to dive deep. We have to go into a place that nobody else has gone before. We in nature, and again, if you listen to these podcasts, you know I say success is different, so own your different. See you next week. But you have to be different. You have to operate in a different way. You have to do things a different way. You have to align things in a different way. You have to see things differently. You have to make different choices. And so here's why this iceberg analogy is so powerful. Is we've got this physical part on top, the part that really everybody sees is the actions you're taking, the habits you develop, the behaviors you operate within, the lifestyles that you generate, but nobody knows about how you got there. And that's where we talk about personalization. That's where we talk about hyper-personalization and creating true sustainability. Because once we identify what spiritually is aligned with you, once you identify what spiritually is your identity, your desires, what you're called for, getting clear on that, getting clear on what God's called you to do, getting clear on what your mission, vision, and values are, getting clear on why you want to do something. That is when you're ultimately able to have this true renewing of your mind. You're able to have this new thought process of, I don't have to be perfect. Oh, I don't have to get it right the first time. This is a process. Well, I am exactly where I need to be. Well, I am learning, not failing. And with that, then creates emotional stability, confidence, conviction, certainty, rather than confusion, overwhelm, and frustration. And it is only when that happens that you can then get very specific, very purposeful, and prioritize what physical habit, physical behaviors, change in lifestyle you are going to start to implement. And when we start to see it this way, we're like, oh my gosh, the tip of the iceberg is really where I've been living for the last X number of years. And that's why I've struggled. That's why it's lasted for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months and then fizzled out. That's why I've jumped from iceberg to iceberg to iceberg and really never gotten the results that I've wanted. This is why I felt this inner spiritual frustration that I've never been able to truly overcome. This is when I've kind of been quote unquote faking it until I've made it, and I've never really gotten there because you've been just focusing on the tip of the iceberg. Now, the physical side and the physical representation of things, the physical changes, the physical attributes, the physical habit, the physical lifestyle change, that is the thing. That is the thing that creates the changes you're seeking. But if your iceberg underneath does not have a big base, it's going to melt. It's going to tip over. It's not going to have the deep rootedness, the sustaining power to be there long term, to create the consistency necessary to see the change. And that's why I need you to be spiritually aligned. That's why I need you to be emotionally sound. That's why I need you to be mentally rooted before we identify what priority in a physical set ultimately gets implemented. So that's that personalization side. That's the hyper-personalization side of what conceptually we need to start to realize. And so right now, as you're in this, I'm going to give you a couple seconds to do this. I want you to stop for a second. And I want you to think to yourself, what habits have I developed? Doesn't have to be working out. Remember, it's just a physical manifestation. It's something that is physically here. It could literally be, hey, I podcast 3 times every single week. That is the physical representation of what I'm doing. That is the choice that I'm making. That could literally be one of mine. It could be I go in the sauna. It could be that I go for a walk every day around 12:30. What are these physical habits, these physical changes that you've started to implement that maybe haven't been the things that you were supposed to do? So that's number one. What are you doing right now, and how, or what habits are you engaging in, and how are they relating back to where your base is? Now I want to get a little bit more tactical, because until that point, I could throw all the tactics to you in the world, but at the end of the day, they're just tip of the iceberg things. I wrote this quote down when I was out traveling back on the airplane, and I said, the categories are easy. The workouts, the mindfulness, the nutrition, the hydration, the environment, immune function. To be honest with you, it's our 8 foundational principles we talk about all the time. Those are easy to identify. What is difficult is what to do within them. What specific habits, what specific behaviors, what specific lifestyle changes do you need to make based upon you, based upon your priorities, based upon your needs, based upon your focus, based on your convictions? That's what needs to get super personalized. That's what needs to get specific. And then we can start to talk about the tactics in which that happens, which leads us into number 1, which is testing. So many people in this world talk about testing. And if you listen to my podcast that I did on the difference between serum and cellular testing, it's going to hopefully be an eye-opener for you where you're like, man, I haven't ever done this. I haven't ever looked at this. I haven't ever gone down this road. Well, then, quite frankly, you're earning your illness. You're just simply being okay not knowing. And we have to take ownership back. And so when we talk about testing, it's not just testing for the sake of testing. It's not just testing for the sake of getting a number. It's purposeful and intentional. And what do I mean by that? It's not just testing to see if you have something, but look at the heart of who you're getting the testing from. Number 1, is it serum versus cellular testing? Again, to go dive deep, listen to that podcast that I did a couple weeks ago. But understanding what is actually in the cell versus what is just telling you whether you're broken or not. Definitely lean into the proactivity. You have to understand that. Secondarily, on a testing side, are you doing something from a company that's ultimately trying to get you to go purchase something else? If you're going and getting testing from a company that ultimately on the end of it is selling you peptides, hormone therapy, bulk supplementation, programming that is through a PDF or some type of spreadsheet or an app, it's not customized for you. It's not built for you. There's no way to create context. There's no way to create individuality. There's no emotional, mental, and spiritual alignment there because they're trying to put you in a box. They're trying to put you in a box. And why most health experts and why most medical experts don't even talk about this or don't lean into this, because 1, it's hard to scale. Number 2, it doesn't provide them large margins. And number 3 is they don't have the time or aren't willing to invest the time. So these are things that you have to think about when you're looking at the testing. Testing is super important to get hyper-personalized. Once you get this bottom of the iceberg fixed and in order, spiritually aligned, mentally pure, and emotionally and heart sound, that's when we start to get hyper personalized on the physical changes and the choice in which we're making. And that can be done through testing. And number two, it can be done through supplementation. Now, what do I mean by that? A lot of companies out there going, hey, take my supplementation, but it's generic supplementation. It's just a vitamin D. It's just a vitamin K. It's just a vitamin C. It's just a vitamin B. It's just an omega-3 complex. It's just an iron and folate complex. It's a immune supplement. It's a multivitamin, but it's what they're giving to everyone. And when we realize it's what they're giving to everyone, you realize it's not for you because you're unique, you're different. You need something that is truly compounded for you, something that is truly customized to you, something that is truly built for you. Because if you didn't need that, then quite frankly, anything you took would actually start making you feel better, and we wouldn't be seeing the degradation and the separation and the decay of our health as a society overall. We wouldn't be talking about an obesity rate that's nearing 60%. We wouldn't be talking about an anxiety rate in our society that's nearing 50%. We wouldn't be talking about a rise in heart attacks and cardiovascular issues in people the ages of 30 to 50 that's been rising 2% year over year over the last decade. We wouldn't be talking about these things. These things wouldn't even be in conversation, but that's the reality that we're living in. That is what we've considered normal because we've generalized health, we've generalized solutions and disguised them as personalized. And that has become normal in our society. And I want to call this out and I want to drive attention to this so that you can be empowered to create real change. And then number three is habit, behavior, and lifestyle formation. Again, like I said, once we get clear and spiritually aligned, emotionally and mentally pure and rooted, we can start to choose which habits and behaviors we lean into amongst those 8 foundational principles I talked to you about: exercise, nutrition, sleep, mindset, immune function, environment, hydration, and nutrition. When we look at these 8 areas, when we look at these 8 different foundational principles or levers or handles that we can hold on to, there's different habits in amongst each that you can get really specific to. Man, this one really aligns with me and is really purposeful that I need to lean into because I've now gotten my order right spiritually, mentally, emotionally sound. However, as soon as we do that, we can't just make one habit change or one behavior change and call it a day and say, hey, we got it all figured out. There's going to be iterations to this. There's going to be growth to this. There's going to be steps to this. And the way in which we hyper-personalize it again, we make it based around you, is we start to look at something called heart rate variability. Heart rate variability, you've heard me talk about it so many times, but heart rate variability, otherwise known as HRV, is basically telling us how our body is adapting to stress and strain. Body doesn't know the difference: mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, real, perceived, positive, negative, past, future, or present stress. And so if we are seeing an upward trend in heart rate variability over the course of time, a week or a month, what it's telling us is that we're having a positive reaction or a positive adaptation to the habits and behaviors we're having in our life. Contrary, if we see a downward trend over the course of a week or a month, we are starting to see that the habits and behaviors we're engaging with are not helping us get to where we need to go, are not in order in which we need to, in which we're trying to implement. Thus is an alert or an awareness mechanism to, hey, even though I'm sound spiritually, emotionally, and mentally as to why I'm doing things, what I'm trying to accomplish, and what physical things I'm trying to change, or what habits and behaviors I'm trying to implement, maybe what I focused on isn't what I need in this season, or isn't what I need right now, because my body is still telling me that it's not actually adapting well. I'll give you a perfect example. When I was training for my marathon that I ran a couple months ago, I started to train heavier, meaning running longer distances, running more often. And thus I was depleting myself in nutrients and minerals that I typically wasn't doing before. So because I had my testing, I was able to understand what vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and compounding nutrients I was missing because I was, again, running more than I was used to. I was able to then get a custom formulated supplementation for me that was able to help eradicate some of the fatigue, some of the tiredness, some of the lack of recovery that I was feeling. And then when I was tracking heart rate variability, the habits and behaviors that I had once engaged in, meaning my bedtime was about 10:30 at night and my wake up time was about 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. Well, a lot of the runs that I was doing early, because I needed to get the run done before I went to work for my day, before I didn't want it to start impacting my time with Elise, I was getting up around 5:30. Well, I can't all of a sudden go to bed at 10:30 and wake up at 5:30 and expect myself to feel really good all the time. So what I needed to do was I needed to shift my habits and behaviors, because I started to see a downward trend in HRV. Yes, my physical fitness was improving. Yes, my zone 2 conditioning was improving. Yes, I was starting to see certain weight loss in certain ways. That wasn't the goal, but this is what was starting to manifest. But at the same time, I watched HRV trend start to go downwards. And what I realized was that, hey, I'm not getting the sleep quality I need because I'm getting up earlier than I've been used to. And so what I needed to do was I needed to make two choices. Number one, do I start going to bed an hour earlier? Or do I start giving myself a 20-minute, 30-minute nap window in the middle of the day? And so what I did was I chose the 30-minute nap window. I was like, this is going to be perfect. I can just, again, and if you listen to the podcast on sleep optimization, I talk about how to build the perfect nap, how to actually formulate that. So that's one you definitely want to go back and listen to. But what happens is when I would go and have my nap, I wasn't seeing an upward trend in HRV either. So I was like, maybe this isn't what I need to be doing. And I pushed back my bedtime to about 9:30. All of a sudden, within 4 days, I saw my HRV start to spike, and it started to stay there. And I started to feel more energetic. I started to feel more mentally clear. I started to feel more confident. I started to feel like I was recovering faster. I was sleeping better. And that, for me, was the awareness tool that I needed to generate a hyper-personalized habit and behavior change. So these are the things that we don't get taught in this world. These are the things that are not operating in this world. You could go to a sleep coach and they could tell you what to do, or you could go to a marathon coach and they could tell you what to do, or you could go to a nutritionist and they could tell you what to do, but none of them are going to be giving you this holistic solution. You're going to be piecemealing all of this stuff together, confused as to how to implement it. And then when the expert told you what to do, but it actually didn't create the change that you needed, you lose trust in the person that you were working with and go, maybe this stuff doesn't even work. Maybe it's not for me. You're right. It's not for you because it hasn't been built for you. And so instead of losing trust, instead of turning your back, instead of giving up, instead of feeling hopeless, let's get hopeful, because no solution you've tried yet has been built for you. No solution you've tried yet has been designed for you. No solution you've tried yet has been holistic, mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally aligning so that now we can get hyper-personalized in these areas that truly, truly matter. Again, I love talking about this. I love diving in on this because this is how I live my life. This is how I operate. This is what I've been able to look through the science. This is what I've been able to look through my studies. This is what I've been able to look through experiences with the best athletes in the world through the NCAA and into the NHL. So what all my postgraduate research is in. And then this is what I've actually seen in practical application in real life. And just being able to live this way, just being able to live by a life by design, just being able to take what was real and put it into practical application has been so powerful. It's been life-changing and life-altering, not just for me, but for thousands of others. And I want this to be life-altering and life-changing for you too. Because you taking ownership, you understanding, you getting to a hyper-personalized level, and hyper-personalized does not mean perfection. Hyper-personalized does not mean rigid. Hyper-personalized does not mean no room for error. It actually means the opposite. It means there's going to be lots of errors. And that's so good because it's going to empower you to actually step forward. But it's when you don't have the data, it's when you don't have the information that you ultimately end up doing things and you feel like you're walking in the abyss. You feel like you're walking in the wilderness. You don't know what direction to go. You don't know what impacts it made other than the subjective feeling. And we can't make decisions off of feelings or circumstance. We have to make feelings off of data and conviction. And when we can shift that mindset, when we can shift that thought process, we can get hyper-personalized and forget just the top of the pyramid and realize that there is so much more in the underlying part of the iceberg. And when we get that order right, the physical part on the peak of the iceberg actually starts to become impactful. The iceberg becomes sustainable. It becomes long-lasting. And that is when you change your life. If this is interesting to you, if this is something that stands out to you, if this is something you want to lean into, go to ownitcoaching.com. Start looking into it. Start asking questions. Book a call. Start having a conversation with some of our experts to actually start learning what would your physical changes look like? What would a hyper-personalization routine look like for you? Where would you start? What does this look like? How can you benefit from this? Because that's where you're going to start to see change. That's where you're going to start to be empowered. And that's where you're going to start to really lean in and feel like you're getting traction. At the end of the day, we know success is different. So own your different. And we'll see you guys next week.